Well, thank you. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join this discussion. My name is Chris Martin. I am the Vice President of Public Relations and Social Media for the David James Group. I'm honored to have two um, excellent, informed, savvy, professional guests to share some of their experiences as they cope with, battle, hide, power, scream, rant about some of the things that our government is doing. This started out as a discussion about the government's move to squash DEI efforts in the government programs and elsewhere if they had their choice. But it kind of grew, and as the government sort of started targeting medical and healthcare research, we have a lot of healthcare clients. There's a lot of healthcare associations, of course, and the rippling effects of those moves will be felt all year round. So I asked the folks from the American Society for Cell Biology to join the call too, and Kevin Wilson has been kind enough to join us. Um, Kevin is the vice president, policy governance and partnerships for ASCB. He's worked as a legislative director for U.S. Congressman Robert Wagand, who's a Democrat from Rhode Island, and as a legislative assistant for U.S. Senator Claiborne Pell. He has a bachelor's degree in politics and American government from the Catholic University of America. Kevin, thank you for joining. Some of us remember when Senator Pell was influential in the college financial aid scene, and we're still indebted to the contributions he made there. So thank you for that if you played a role in doing that.
Not at all. I had
Um,
nothing to do with it.
um, Also joining me is Karen Hording. She is the executive director and CEO of the Society of Women Engineers, a position she's had since about 2014. But germane to this conversation, of course, Karen, you have a deep science background too. You used to work for AAAS and the National Academy of Science, right?
That is correct.
And SWE, this is noteworthy, is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. And I can't imagine that in those 75 years, anybody associated with SWE has ever gone through a month like you guys have in the last month. So this is truly kind of a unique and a bit terrifying experience for a lot of us. So, Karen, I want to start with you. Um, when the government moved to started squashing DEI and asking programs to remove the language from their websites, their programs, and things like that, what was your first reaction? And then I want to kind of feel you out for how and where you found out about the government's move to cancel the Society of Women Engineers section at West Point too.
Yeah. So thanks, Chris. Happy to be here. Wish it was different circumstances, but we are where we are, right? I actually suspected that this was going to be part of the first 100 days. For anyone that listened to any of the Republican National Convention last year, this was sort of one of the big talking points. And I remember having a conversation with my husband in the car where we were listening to some of it on the radio, where I said, this is really going to impact my organization. So we knew, we just didn't really know the size and scope of it. So obviously the executive order came out. We don't get a huge amount of federal money at SWE, though we do have one fairly large NSF grant. But we do work with a lot of the defense contractors and some of the government agencies. And so we knew there would be impact, at least immediately, based on those organizations. Then certainly the West Point memo drew a lot of attention. New York Times featured it, and we saw a lot of activity on our social media. The one thing I loved about what I saw on our social media was people really jumping in support of SWE and saying how beneficial the organization had been to them or to people they knew. Some folks from the military jumping in to comment, and both men and women. So that was really great to see, because I think for a lot of us, when we see something start on social media, the immediate reaction is like, oh my gosh, I've got to respond. And I think in this case, we really saw members or other stakeholders kind of jumping in support of SWE. And sort of the biggest question was, what are we going to do to support those students? And so we did, our current board president is actually a civilian employee of the military. And so we worked with her and some of her communications folks around a note to the students, really outlining how we were going to jump in to support them, getting them connected with local professional sections, extending their membership for a year. We have a veterans and military affinity group, reminding them that they have access to that. And again, all talking about that this was things they could do on their personal time, right? So we don't want to do anything to jeopardize their commission, but we wanted them to know that they are part of this community and that we are here to support them in any way that we can. We also drafted a note to our members, which anybody can go to SWE.org. We have a link to it from our homepage. Again, telling them that, we were aware of what was happening and that there's a lot of uncertainty. We have had some partners who have pulled back from things. We're in the midst of our We Local conference season, which is our smaller set of conferences that we do. And we have lost a few sponsors because they were government agencies and kind of directly in the crosshairs of this. Others are very much in a wait and see mode. Also, others have said, hey, we're all in. This is important. And I've tried to frame it of, look, we want to onshore everything. That's the movement, right? We want to innovate everything here, invent everything here, make everything here. And we can't do that if we don't have the talent to do it. And so I certainly don't think anyone thinks we can do that just with white men. We really need to be including all the talent that's out there in engineering and technology. And so we had a meeting with our corporate partners last week, and I talked about, here's what SWE does. We help you find the best talent available in engineering and technology. When you've got that talent on board, we help with professional development and workforce development. We advocate for the engineering profession. We advocate for STEM education because we know that early pipeline, we're not going to have the workforce of tomorrow if we aren't getting all kids involved in STEM. If anyone saw the recent math scores, like we've got some work to do here in the country. So these are the things SWE does. Does anybody see anything on that list that they have issue with? And of course, like those things are all important to, the economy, to national security. And so it's a bit of like, I think we're not changing our mission. I'm in the midst of a board meeting out in California, and yesterday we had a pretty strong conversation about, this has been our mission for 75 years, and we are going to continue to do our mission and support our community. But, let's talk about what we do in real terms. And so that's really been the focus of it. And then just assuring the members that, there is a lot we don't know. If I had a crystal ball, I'd probably be doing something else for a living, but here's what we do know. Here's the steps we're taking to address what we do know. And here's how we're going to continue to support the members and to advance our mission. And we welcome those who want to come on board and help us do that. But I think it's just in general, we've all got to be sort of uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And when you're the leader of an organization, that's challenging. I'm not going to deny that, I haven't had a few sleepless nights, but let's take it one day at a
Sure.
time. Let's deal with what we know, and let's communicate when we have something to communicate. Like we all thought it was important. I had a team come together and we worked on that message to members. And as we learn more things, we will communicate that. But we are not going to issue some big statement to the outside world. We've certainly been contacted by press about some of the things with West Point, and we've directed them to our message and shared what we're doing for those students. But I would say we're taking not an incredibly conservative approach and not a incredibly risky approach. We're kind of in the middle.
So it's funny that you mentioned communication, because one of the things that you and I talked about this week was what should be the communications cadence for an issue like this. When you're at the beginning of it, it could go on forever. There could be an issue every day, and you could be reporting to your members constantly. Um, but when you're at the beginning of it, you don't know where it ends either. So, how do you sort of strike a balance between being upfront about an issue, being communicative, but not overdoing it and not causing undue panic too?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's when there is something that's new to report, right? Like we don't really know where this is going to end up. The court challenges are just starting. I think this week Apple shareholders push back on proposition to roll back DEI within the organization. I think some of the organizations that were the first to jump up and say, okay, we're going to take a step back are financially starting to feel the pain from that. So we don't really know where all this is going to end up, but I think as we see changes to how it's impacting our organization, I think that's where we'll want to communicate.
Tell me a little bit, take me behind the scenes among those first meetings that you had with your board and your close sort of senior managers. What was the tone? Were people like up in arms, ready to fight, or were they a little scared, a little concerned? What was the sort of early conversations that you guys had about this issue? Because the rippling effects could be quite long and quite harmful.
Yeah, I think early on there was a mix of panic and disbelief, right? And I've even had people say to me, "Oh, well, Society of Women Engineers, why would you be impacted by the executive order? That it's not talking about you." And I'm like, "Well, technically it is." So yes, we are impacted, but I think it was also that, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And one of the things I tried to do was say, look, we're celebrating our 75th anniversary. Over that course of 75 years, we had the 9/11 attacks, we had an economic downturn. Early days, there were wars going on.
Right.
COVID. We've been through some things and we've survived because we're a smart organization. We manage our funds very well. We've got strong reserves. Like we will get through this. Might it be painful? Absolutely. Might we have to change how we do some things? Maybe. But what has kept us around for 75 years and growing? I mean, we're almost 50,000 members this year. 19,000 folks at our annual conference in Chicago back in October. It's because we've delivered on our mission. We've evolved as an organization in how we serve our members. We've stayed ahead of what their needs are, and we've adapted. And so we're going to continue to do that. So let's try to, get the panic down to a manageable level and then figure out what are the things we want to communicate. And we want to communicate to the members that we're here and we're here for them. Because for a lot of them, they're in the crosshairs, they're working for government labs or they're working for agencies that have been targeted. And so their level of uncertainty, like, am I even going to have a job through all of
Yeah.
this? It's like that's where we need to step up and say, hey, we're your community, we're your people, we're here for you, and we're not going anywhere.
It's a good reminder that associations provide strength in numbers, and to leverage your members wherever you can. I know you're going to be in San Jose this weekend in the middle of Silicon Valley and a lot of defense contractors. And I'm curious what you think the rank and file members are going to be sort of experiencing and feeling. It'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback you get from the
Yeah.
people on the
Yeah.
ground there.
From an attendance perspective, we're sold out.
Yeah.
Not surprising because I think in these times, people really want that community. I know I've been to some association activities over the past month or so, and just all the CEOs getting together and talking and what's your messaging and how are you dealing with it? And so I would say, even for me, just being part of my own community has been incredibly helpful, just to be able to talk with others and, texting with each other post the event just to say, hey, what are you doing? Here's, let me share what we're putting out. And just to feel that sense of, you know, we're only stronger together.
really appreciate that feedback. Please, if you have a question for Karen or Kevin coming up, please write it down in the chat. We'll try to answer it at the end of the webinar here. And if we can't get to them, we'll forward those questions to the speakers and try and make a connection offline that way. I want to bring Kevin in. Kevin, for the attendees, tell us a little bit about what ASCB is and what is your main mission?
So ASCB is a professional society of very basic biomedical researchers. If it is bigger than a cell, our members are not all that interested in it. And that is, among other things, even in the area of advocacy, that can be a bit of a hindrance. But that's who we are, and that's all we have. I think probably at any given time of the year, 6,000 to 8,000 members. We have an annual meeting each year in December, and throughout the rest of the year, we keep in touch with our members through various professional development activities and stuff like that.
So you sit sort of in between researchers who work in labs and legislators, right?
Yeah. So that's my job is to I'm the translator between two communities who are very curious about each other but do not understand each other for all the money in the world. I think the scientists would love to be politicians, and the politicians would love nothing more than to be scientists.
Right. When you first started hearing about the government move to freeze NIH funding, what was the reaction at your headquarters office? And take us sort of behind the scenes about, the meetings that you guys had and what were your thought processes and sort of strategy sessions like?
So I may get the order wrong here, but one of the first things that we were concerned about, honestly, is the protection of the organization. We also looked back at the way the community, including just the larger, not just the science community, but the community at large, handled the first term. And that was, I think, you could describe it more of using a meat knife instead of a scalpel. Everybody said whatever they thought. It was just, flood the zone kind of thing. I think what everybody is being now is and we had the opportunity to look back and see what worked and what didn't work. So I think there was a lot of conversation in the very beginning about, well, if we have to do this again, then we want to learn the lessons of what did not work last time. And honestly, we have to make sure that in this environment, we have to make sure that we protect our organizations. One of the first executive orders that came out on the topic of DEI talked about how a list would be created and would be shared. And I know when I read that part, it kind of hit with a thud, because what's that list going to be used for? And that kind of worried it. But it also helped frame what we were going to do for advocacy. And it's really interesting because a lot of what Karen was talking about from a communications point of view, I was trying to keep up with all of my notes about the things that we're doing too from advocacy. And then I ran out of paper. So
I'm going to share the link to the alert that you guys put out in the chat because I thought it was an interesting approach. I am curious, like, what do you think has worked so far? Going back maybe in time, what has worked for you guys that you're applying now to this? Because it's got to be hard to go back even in your recent history and say, oh, we'll just pull this strategy out because I'm sure it'll work on this. When this is a completely unique situation, that's really unprecedented.
Yeah, one of the advantages of being around an organization for a really long time is you have the benefit of hindsight, I guess. And one of the things that is really interesting is, we had made a decision a number of years ago that we were going to change the way we did advocacy. Advocacy used to be based on quantity. Even when I worked on the Hill, I got delivered to my desk one day a Xerox copy box, paper box, full of messages from Rhode Island. And the senator wanted to know how many there were. And I actually measured an inch of paper and then did a little bit of math to say, I assume there's this many. He didn't believe me. He actually came over and had to look at it. So that's the way the advocates used to talk to the Hill, and that's to a large degree the way the Hill used to make decisions. If they heard from a lot of people, that would go into their decision-making process about policymaking. About 10 years ago, I saw a survey in which the people on the Hill were asked, if you haven't made a policy decision in your office, what is the best way for your essentially for your decision to be influenced? And what we started to hear from them was a quality versus quantity. And in the same survey, there was a question of people in my position saying, what is your best tool to influence the Hill? And it was quantity over quality. The advocacy community had, and I still think to a certain extent, has a problem with figuring out how to get the right messages to the Hill. We stopped that and changed it to quality. We didn't really have an opportunity to test it because for a very long time, the NIH and NSF communities have been strongly supported by Congress.
Right.
The irony of this is that what is necessary, what seems to be necessary in this situation, breaks all of my rules that I said I thought we needed. And I do think that it has to go, it has gone back to an issue of quantity. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're starting to see cracks being developed now, because offices on the Hill are being inundated with not just a message about scientists, but inundated from constituents about everything. And but I don't think that means that we'll go back to the way we always did things. I don't think that this will always work. It's just the unique time that we're in right now that makes a difference.
I thought your approach in the link I shared in the chat is the immediate alert, inviting representatives from Congress to visit a lab in their district. And I thought that was interesting because a lot of times with associations during a crisis or a big event or a big sort of issue, they want to retract and they get a little bit more conservative. They go into a little bit of a shell and they're protecting themselves. And Lord knows this is a good time to do that. Nobody could blame you for wanting to do that for sure. But sometimes you have to go the opposite way and be more open and more inviting if you want to make an impact. So share a little bit of the background for how you guys decided to do that and how you came to come to that decision.
So the first thing to keep in mind is that is actually the fourth alert that we've sent out. We had sent out 3 previous alerts asking people to make phone calls. And I even included in the alerts a script about what members could say. Yeah. One of the reasons I went to the lab tour was, number one, I wanted to switch it up and not continually ask my members to make phone calls. I wanted to give them something different to do. Also, there is a congressional recess coming up in March, and people in congressional offices now are essentially saying, what are we going to do with the boss now? And it also works because they are curious. And the final point is, this is not the society, this is not the ASCB talking or making those requests. These are individual scientists speaking as constituents, both in the phone calls and in the lab tour requests. So that makes it different. It's one-on-one. They are their constituents. This is money that's going into their states. These are all the arguments that we're making. I haven't talked to the Hill. I have no intention. I've talked to the Hill on my own, but we
Yeah.
are not going to write, at least now we're not writing individual letters. We sign big group letters, but this is a direct thing for my members to talk to their representatives.
How is that being received by the members who you're asking to participate in actively and the legislators? Are they being receptive? Are you getting a good response so far?
Well, so the interesting thing about this is that this is so um, I can't tell you the number of messages I've got from scientists that I know who tell me that their people are scared. I've never heard that used before.
Yeah.
Um, and so we put together sort of a few step plan, and the first thing we did was we sent out a message from our president to all of our members, essentially saying, "We're here for you. We understand, and we've got your back." Because even just from a membership point of view, I think it is important for our members to know that we're here for them, that they're not alone to the smallest extent that that matters, but they're not feeling alone. And honestly, that they're getting something for their membership, quite frankly. And then I went on to okay, here's what I want you to do and why I want you to do it and how to do it. Um, I am not sure. I am not sure if how many members are making phone calls. There is almost no way to ever tell how it's received on the Hill because, I've heard stories. I mean, one of my own senators had to buy, for her office, they had to buy an expanded voicemail system. They are getting so many emails in. So I don't think that it will ever be quantified any place. I mean, they may be taking notes about the topic and putting a slash mark and something like that. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I would be surprised if it went any further than that. There's just too much coming in.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and then you know, we tend to have more members who say they are participated in our advocacy requests than actually do it. Um, but that's kind of where we are right now.
I wanted to seize on something you said because I know Sui and Karen, you have a big meeting in the fall. Kevin, you have a big research meeting in December, and we're all hoping this kind of blows over a little bit so that you can actually have a meeting. But when you and I were talking earlier this week, you were fearful that, you know, this would really have a chilling effect on the research being presented. I'm curious, a lot of the people on this call work for associations. Associations, one of the things, the best things they do are have meetings where people can network, share information, access new research. If there's less research or no research, that's going to be a real problem for society and for associations. So um, I'm I'm sure you guys are all thinking about that, but I'm kind of curious about what kind of steps that can be taken um, to kind of lessen that blow if it comes.
Yeah. Uh, that's that's the problem. Our meeting is in December, and almost all the time having a meeting in December is not great because everybody has spent their travel budgets for the rest of the year. This actually may turn out to be a, a better thing, only in the framework that um, things may come to more of a may settle. But of course, for a December meeting, our abstracts our abstract system opens in June. So
Right.
that's the time frame that we're working on. Will there be enough science by June? And will people feel comfortable and feel that they have the resources to travel to a place in December? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen, I know SWE isn't a huge research meeting per se like ACSB, but you've got a lot of moving parts there, a lot of different constituency stakeholders that could be affected in different ways that we don't even really anticipate quite yet. So I'm sure that's a concern for SWE. And how are you kind of grappling with that, given that you have to put on a big meeting? That's a lot to undertake.
Yeah, I mean, so our call for participation is open now. I mean, the good thing is we typically get 75% of what we receive, we have to turn down because we just don't have the capacity. We get far more submissions than we can accept. So, I mean,
Mhm.
we'll see when the call closes what that looks like. I mean, we have heard some people being told that they can submit as individuals, but they can't mention their organization name. So we may see more of that where people are representing their work in a way that it's just them as individuals versus mentioning their companies. Others are saying, we are proud to support and proud to continue. So it's a little bit all over the place right now. I think as we start to get a little bit closer, we'll have a better sense. But to Kevin's point, I think right now people are still in that wait and see mode because there is starting to be so much challenge to some of this.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't
Is
have a
there?
summer meeting.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Is there a hope among both of you that this crisis creates more sunshine, more spotlight on you guys, and then this is an opportunity to really shine and talk more openly about what you do and why it's so important? I know, Kevin, you and I were talking about what is the impact if the let's just say the 15% indirect cost cut that's being bandied about for NIH. What are the implications of that?
Well, the difficulty is that everything involved in what cell biologists do is complicated, from what it is they do um, to um, to even things like the indirect rates. Um, Two of my members had a I guess a lunch discussion yesterday with members of their department to explain to them what indirect rates are. Um, and it can very quickly make your head hurt. But the thing is that it is vitally important. I saw a comment this morning that said that if my lab doesn't have lights, I don't have a lab. And that's exactly what it comes down to. And it's bandied about as, universities making a lot of cash off of this, but it's that's not what it is. But the problem is both taking something as complicated than even from an advocacy point of view, taking something complicated like that to explain it to the advocate who is then going to who might not understand it, who is then going to explain it to uh, a young staffer on the Hill who couldn't in a million years guess this is something that they're going to hear about, and then they have to tell another staffer. So you can't get into the weeds on this. It has to be a very quick, short message. And I settled on something close to universities are our partners. And because if that's the one thing I want my scientists to deliver to the Hill, and if that's one thing I want the Hill to take away from that, that may be the best that we can do. It's also in the details is not our issue. This is a university issue. And for a number of reasons. But I don't want to totally walk away from it. Because if there's no electricity, there's no research.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Chris, from the sweep perspective, back to what I was saying at the beginning. This is about US global competitiveness. This is about national security. This is our economy. And we can't do all these things if we don't have everybody in the pool that has the skills, has the talent, and again, that pipeline as well. So this isn't I think these are the unintended consequences of some of these things that people didn't really think through.
One of the ironies of the Project 2025 report is in the science sections, it lists all of these things that they want to do away with. They want to cut away certain areas of research. They want to do away with immigration. But they all and there are a couple other things, right? And they want to, cut back the size of the federal government. But then they also say numerous times throughout these sections that they want to make sure that the United States continues to be the world leader in science. You can't do all of those things and remain the world leader in science. Um, but you know, right now we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah. I encourage all the attendees or any attendees that have a question, please drop it in the chat. We'll try to answer it. I know Karen is going to press for time, so we might let her go earlier, but I do want to ask both of you, going forward, how are you monitoring this issue? How are you staying abreast of breaking news? Because it's at an accelerated pace, even for the industries that you guys are in, which are usually pretty brisk in terms of the information flow. How are you guys staying on top of this?
I'll just say, Chris, just, groups that I'm a part of where I'm on listservs. SWE is part of a couple of coalitions. And so they've been gathering up a lot of information and dispersing it, doing some analysis on it, and then sharing it out. Weekly conversation with our legal counsel about what they're seeing and how they're advising um, clients. My staff that works with our employer partners is having those conversations, and just as many sources as we can to keep up on what's happening. And I do stress coalitions are a great way to be part of things, from both getting information to being part of larger efforts, whether that be letters or meetings or, op-eds, those kind of things. Because I think even for my own organization, it's much easier to position us as part of a larger collaborative or coalition than just standing there out on the ledge on our own.
Yeah, you had mentioned at the beginning the feedback you got on social media from members and how important that is, and to the attendees, almost all of you have pretty sophisticated social media programs. Community management of those programs should be part of the daily sort of scope that you do, but even more so today, you really have to look at those notifications, the comments on your social media more carefully. You don't want to bypass those. You want to look at those really closely. Um, Kevin, you had said something to me earlier about coalitions. Karen mentioned coalitions, about how you want to be a part of a big coalition in this issue, not a small one. You don't want to stand out too much, but there's strength in numbers, isn't there?
There absolutely is, and I would be. I mean, we've sort of set it up right now that we will, like Karen said, we will work with our partners. We have a lot of great partners and who are in the same boat that we are in. I start every Monday morning with a, a conference call with scientific societies, with the CEOs and the policy directors, um, with sharing information. This is all about sharing information, right? Um, and if an issue comes up where it is of value for us to put our head above water a little bit, then we'll do that. But other than that, we want to be part of a a large group of people, a larger group of organizations who are speaking with one voice. I really do believe that this is another instance in which quantity really helps. You could be the one person writing one great letter, and all that's going to do is get the spotlight on you at the White House.
Yeah, that's an existential concern among folks in the crosshairs these days for sure. So there is definitely some safety in numbers. Um, how do you so speaking of coalitions, coalitions are great, but they kind of have a reputation for being passive a little bit. You join a coalition but you don't really do anything with it. How do you guys leverage the safety in numbers or the strength in numbers in those cases?
I mean, I'm seeing much more push in the ones we're a part of to be more aggressive and to be more outspoken. And, if we don't speak for our community, who will, kind of thing. I think I love Kevin's program around invite somebody to your lab, because it's like this is impacting real people doing important work. And I think, we need to be telling those stories. And so the more we can do that from the collective, I think the better it will be. But I tend to think of like science and engineering, we tend to be a little bit conservative. And I'm seeing that sort of being pushed aside a little bit, because all of a sudden these are not executive orders just in theory. They're impacting real people, real lives, important work that as a country we know we need to do. So I think all of a sudden it's like, no, if we don't speak for our work and our communities, who will?
And that's what I tell our members all the time. There are not bands of you know of lobbyists on Capitol Hill who work for other organizations advocating for us. If we don't do it, no one else will. The irony is that, so with these letters that come out, I mean, we don't sign everyone. There's one that came out that I thought was a little bit, I didn't like the tone. And I wasn't sure whether there were maybe some factual problems with it. And the other thing was, honestly, there weren't a lot of people that joined onto it. So I took a pass on that. But the most important thing is, I mean, everything from an advocacy point of view right now that we need is information. Can't get enough information. I sit down my coffee at 6:30 in the morning and I'm looking at Blue Sky and Twitter and Facebook and whatever is happening. And you synthesize all that information because it's not all going to be right. Um, and and then you've got to put it all together and figure out what fits for you. Um, so, and I'm not sure that beyond just how far up the volume is, honestly, right now, I'm not sure that every organization or every community is going to be the one that makes the significant change. So in some cases, I'm finding myself having to hold back the members a little bit. They think if we just do X, the topic right now, if we just have a science march, all will be right with the world. Sorry, So trying to figure out what the things are that fit the plan that you've established, and that speaks with what your vision and the mission of your organization is, and also what they're, from a point of view of how you talk to your members about advocacy, what they're used to expecting. There are some organizations who aren't very vocal when it comes to advocacy. ASCB has a very long history, luckily, of speaking with a louder voice. And so you need to also be sure that you are modulating what you're doing with your history and also what your members expect of you.
It's definitely a good point. Are we going to be seeing a full page New York Times ad from one of your coalitions, Kevin, soon?
They're they're too expensive,
Okay.
and B, quite honestly, we've already convinced that crowd.
Right. Yes. True.
And Chris, I apologize. I've got to drop off and head back to the board meeting, but
Sure.
yes, questions, Chris,
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
if people have questions, they can send them to you and I'll be happy to have some offline conversations.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Safe travels.
Thanks.
Yeah, please do drop a question in the chat here if you want. I just shared a Google Doc that I created, just sort of a little bit of a uh, capturing some of the association's reactions to these issues, both DEI and the medical funding thing. It's not comprehensive by any means. There's no way that could be, but I thought it'd be helpful to just, in associations, we like to see how our peers are doing things, just to get some ideas and see what would work for us. So this document gives you like a sense of how other associations have handled it, in a small way. You can tell that the responses have been pretty all over the board, and some associations are running for cover and others are being more aggressive. So the issue for most associations is knowing your culture, your history, your mission, knowing your members. Associations never want to get too far out ahead of their members, but they don't want to be lagging an issue or falling behind either. So they want to strike the right balance or the right chord on these important issues. So this can help you do that. Kevin, any final bits of advice for our attendees on how they might monitor or manage or respond to this issue going forward?
Well, only in that, I think this is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. And I think we have to uh, look at it that way. I think the other thing is, I'm sure everybody on this call feels the same way I do. I just feel like there's just a fire hose pointed at me right above my computer's camera.
Yeah,
And I do think it's important that everybody take care of themselves too. This is going to be a long way.
yeah, you can get burned out on this pretty quickly, and it's easy to feel a little despondent at times. So
Yeah.
definitely take care of yourself, watch your mental health issues, that kind of stuff. So without any further ado, Kevin, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. If I get any questions, I'll pass them on to you. There is a
Absolutely.
recording, there'll be a recording of this available for people that want to review it, or if some of your colleagues missed it, we'll be able to share it. All the links to the helpful documents that Kevin and Karen's organizations created are in the chat. We'll make sure that those are available as well too. So
Yeah. And if
without further,
anybody,
yeah.
if anybody wants to get in touch with me, let me know. I don't pretend to have the corner on the market, and we all can learn from each other. So anything I can do to help.
Absolutely. Okay. Kevin, thanks again for your time. Good luck on this issue, and maybe we'll have you back in December when your conference is set to run.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Bye bye.